Welcome to Leading Entrepreneurs of the World. I'm Stelios Hatzakis, CEO of One Business World. Leading Entrepreneurs of the World features entrepreneurs, founders, and business leaders presenting on cutting-edge topics and the latest industry developments. Today, we're very pleased to welcome global entrepreneur, Mohammed Ashoor. Mohammed is the co-founder and CEO of Springring. Springring is based out of Bahrain, and its goal is to bridge the communication gap between homes and schools by providing a school communication management platform. At Springring, Mohammed and his team aim at unifying and simplifying all forms of school communication, abiding by their mission to bring school admins, teachers, parents, and students on one efficient, unified platform, and their belief that better communication leads to better education. Mohammed, it's great. We're super excited to have you here with us today to hear more about the accelerated adoption of technology in broader education. Welcome to Leading Entrepreneurs of the World.
Thank you, Stelios. So thanks again for the intro and for the invitation to speak here today. I'm happy to do this from Bahrain. And as you mentioned, my name is Mohammed Ashoor. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Springring. And just to take you through one of the things that I've been very passionate about and has gained a lot of attention over the past year or so, which is education and technology. So just in terms of going through the COVID pandemic and how people have adopted differently throughout the world, and it has definitely affected people in different ways. So just to start off with, basically the whole world has been going through a global experiment of a sort. Education has been one of the slowest industries in terms of adoption of technology and digital transformation in general. But the COVID-19 pandemic has created, in some people's view, an opportunity, in others, a huge challenge to the way we deliver education to young people. So the focus here today and what I'm going to be talking about is mainly pre-K to K-12 education. But that doesn't mean that higher education and all other educational institutions like training institutions haven't been affected in some way or the other. Just one thing that I've seen floating around a lot over the past year is a term of, education moving from BC to AD. Now, basically BC being before COVID and AD after the disease. So, and this is quite poignant in a way that it shows the enormous transition that education is going through. So what I'm planning on doing today is basically taking everyone through the journey of this transformation from basically before the coronavirus, i.e. Before 2020, and during 2020, and how it seems like it's even gone through 21, and we're still living through it. And what are the major trends that people are expecting to see in the future, and how much of a change education will be ongoing during this period. So just starting with education more broadly and as a whole, before the coronavirus, education globally had its own challenges. So one of the things that UNESCO had come up with only in 2019 in their annual reports was that more than 250 million children were out of school. 800 million adults were illiterate. And even out of those children within schools, almost 400 million, which is more than 50%, lack basic reading skills. So in general, education was facing major challenges globally due to a variety of reasons, whether it's poverty, whether it's these children being in low income or even mid income countries, either in the developing world or otherwise. So, this is basically why education has always been at the forefront of any government's plans to develop. And global expenditure at the time in 2019 was almost around $4.7 trillion, and almost all of it was covered by governments, and that was almost around 80% of that amount. So, just in general, going through the history of educational technology, educational technology was not uh, presented within schools to transform the way we educate children, but rather as a tool for the delivery of education mainly. And this has kind of developed throughout. Even the term educational technology is quite taken very loosely, and we'll see this throughout the presentation. So this is just a quick history. You're talking about the late 1700s, where students had slates and portable devices just to kind of take notes, the introduction of chalkboards, and then when more during the Industrial Revolution, with the introduction of radios, projectors, videotapes, photocopiers for mass production of learning materials. But then we saw a leap in a way with the introduction of the personal computer. Now, other industries have seen a much faster adoption of these technologies than uh, schools have. Mainly, the computer was just introduced to kind of introduce children to the technology, but not used to deliver as much educational material as other industries were utilizing computers for. The internet obviously provided both a huge opportunity, but also major challenges in the way that education was presented. Of course, it provided almost unlimited access to information at the time. But again, we haven't seen that kind of creep into schools as much as at the time. And then obviously the tools, whether it was online systems like learning management systems, school management systems, and the likes, and eventually with the introduction of the iPad, so to speak, and also its adoption very slowly within schools over the preceding period. Now, one of the major challenges has always been cost, but as we can see later on, not only did the costs affect this adoption, but you had also a lot of pushback. So not only from teachers, so teachers in a sense required a lot of training. There was a fear of technology at the time. So to this day and to 2019, and I would say even 2020, the teaching community in general was, and we cannot generalize obviously, but as a whole, there was a lack of training and adoption of technologies in general. And the way things were taught were pretty much the same for the past few decades. So teachers on one end, but as a parent myself, and as I've seen with many parents, when technology is introduced within schools, there's also a pushback from parents also not wanting their children to be too exposed to technology from a young age. So there was always this tug of war between schools that wanted to introduce technology and wanted to kind of move with the times, and between the parent community who also had its own reservations, so to speak. Now, obviously, this is applicable to schools that actually were pushing for technological adoption. But you had other schools that had different challenges in terms of the costs, the training, the introduction and change management that is required. So all these kind of things affected the introduction of technology within schools. So it kind of remained very limited to interactive whiteboards. It remained kind of limited to uh, touch screens and projectors and so on that would mainly serve the teachers in the delivery of their lessons, but not as much an introduction to the children at the time. Now, on the other side, the proponents of technology had different views, obviously. And this is something that we've seen even from, 2015, a bit maybe before that. But at the time when schools wanted to introduce it, the argument was always that it could improve both engagement of students within the schools. It would help with retention of information in general, and it would also help with special needs. So this was a tool that could also help students that had either special needs or would respond to different types of learning styles. And it promotes collaboration. It gives teachers the ability to get quick submission of work, give instant feedback that will be straight away given to both either the students and in some limited cases to the parents as well. And the biggest, obviously, argument is that schools and education needed to move with the time. The workplace had moved on, and in order to provide for these students to be able to enter the workplace and be productive and in demand, then technology should be part of their learning process. Now, these two things, whether they're the challenges that were faced and obviously the advantages on the other end, created a big friction, so to speak. And because the educational system has a lot of different actors within, so you have the school management and administrators from one end, then to parents, students who were introduced to technology and wanted to adopt it, although obviously they had their own kind of views and ways on how to adopt this, but they were also pushing for that. But then you had the teachers who were either ill prepared or required training and also some sort of change to be pushed. Now, all of these challenges obviously were slowing the adoption of technology. And as I just mentioned, out of all the industries, education has been by far the slowest in adoption of technology. But then 2020 hits, the COVID 19 pandemic pretty much engulfs the world. And we see a major lockdown and disruption of education globally. So as you can see here, estimates we're putting the number of students or learners in general that had to stay at home and continue their education from home to almost 1.7 billion. And that's basically 90% of the learners globally, and this touched over 190 countries and for prolonged periods of time. Now, some countries have decided to stay open, and those were very few. Others kind of localized their lockdowns. So some students managed to attend, others couldn't. And pretty much up until June of 2020, 90% of the world were pretty much doing remote learning with no on-premise attendance. Uh, Now, being in Bahrain, I've experienced that myself with my kids. Um, they basically stayed at home from beginning of March of 2020 all the way until the end of the academic year at the end of June of 2020. So that presented its own challenges throughout. The problem with the lockdowns didn't only extend to moving people from on-premise learning to online learning. Because of the disparity and the big differences and equity between different countries. In developed countries, mainly, the digital divide was not felt as much. People managed to go home, managed to transition with all the difficulties, of course, and the change management required, but managed to transition and effectively just deliver education to the children to varying, obviously, degrees and successes. But they have managed to at least go ahead with it. In less developed countries, in low income countries, the digital divide presented a further challenge to delivering education. But that also didn't even stop there. Not only the delivery of education, so you had the disruption of education itself, but the implication went even beyond that on, the health, safety, rights of children, and especially where countries that are not as stable internally, who have a lot of, child abuse cases and so on. So the whole idea of moving simply from an on-premise educational system to a remote learning system cannot be taken as a simple transition in location or venue, but also has to be looked at from a more holistic point of view, where you have a lot of other effects that are not probably directly affecting education, but indirectly affecting that as well. And one of the things that we have seen countries, obviously, and this we can see from this graph, countries responded differently based on their geographical location or region. So the adoption, and this is when we speak about edtech and the word itself and how loosely defined it is. Uh, Radio was used to deliver educational lessons to some students in some countries. Television, and in Bahrain, I can also say Bahrain was one of the countries that used television to deliver online lessons. But predominantly, obviously, as you can see from the graph on the bottom right corner, online platforms were playing the biggest role in bridging the gap that was caused by the major lockdowns during that period. Now, the issue with this sudden transition that happened over this period was that it didn't really transform education. There was no big educational transformation or online transformation that happened, but rather it was mainly focused on the delivery of lesson, the delivery of education to children. It basically took your on-premise physical way of teaching and brought it online, which in itself presented its own challenges because you only looked at the digitization of things, but you're delivering in the same way that things were delivered in class, which obviously is an experiment in itself and presented its own problems as things prolonged over that period. So one of the things, obviously, that affected this in a big way was uh, all the actors within this community of education. So on the one hand, you had school administrators that had to quickly scramble, and especially schools that were not as prepared as others from a technological point of view. So just the reorganization and the increased communication and management of all their people. We can't forget teachers had to also work and deliver their lessons from home, which created another layer of difficulty where teachers had to communicate online, but also deliver then their lessons to students online as well. Now, when it came to those teachers, a lot of them found themselves ill prepared from a training perspective to deliver on these lessons, whether it's through online live lessons or recorded lessons and so on. So a lot of schools had to get outside help, technological help, that is, just to kind of facilitate, train the teachers and so on. Some schools took gaps where they stopped education for a while and then resumed after giving as much training as they can to the teachers. A lot of them, a lot of the teachers didn't take a front end role, so they were not delivering the lessons as much, whereas others had bigger classes to deliver those lessons to online. So a lot of change happened from a school perspective. But on the other hand, you had parents and students at home, and that created another problem as well. Parents who were not as involved in their children's education prior to this pandemic found that a lot of responsibility fell on their shoulders, and they did not have enough communication channels. They couldn't get in touch with either the teachers or the school administrators, and this is another challenge on that front. Now, with students, the transition for a lot of them has been a lot smoother in terms of the utilization of technology. So they knew how to use, they adapted maybe, so in some instances, even faster than their parents. But the main thing that they lacked within this whole prolonged period of homeschooling, or I wouldn't call it homeschooling, but online schooling, was the lack of social interactions that they used to have during their on-premise schooling before the pandemic. And all these challenges, of course, just compound themselves and present a lot of resistance when it comes to uh, how these things will affect education in the long run, because a lot of these actors, whether they're school administrators, teachers, parents, or students, uh, have not taken to technology in a very positive way, for lack of preparation, of course, by schools and parents before the pandemic, but because of the negative response that each of these people had, uh, it created a resistance and a barrier to introduction of more technology, or the change and move into a more kind of online or hybrid uh, educational system. Now, this is basically how it went during the pandemic. It presented challenges, it presented obstacles, it presented a lot of challenges that no one had foreseen or was prepared for. Uh, but one thing one outtake, I would say, that came out of this was that schools, educational systems, and indeed governments were not well prepared to handle such a disruption. Although it's extraordinary, it's not something that people would expect, and we hope that we don't see this again in the near future. Hopefully, when we get out of this and soon, but at the same time, a lot of what happened was that the realization was that they were not prepared to tackle this challenge. And for this reason, obviously, the reaction has been by either the private educational system or by governments that we need a lot more investment in educational technology tools in general. So one of the things that is expected within the next 5 years is that the total expenditure on educational technology will almost double, from almost 200 billion to 400. but also the percentage of the educational technology spend from the total educational expenditure will also rise from 3.6 to almost 5.2%. And as you can see here, the percentage spent on educational technology as a total of education was quite low before the pandemic. So this is a trend that is seen to rise in the near future. In terms of just sectors in general, and this is a great graph that EdTech Global Report came out with just recently at the tail end of 2020. And these are all the basically subsectors involved in education in general. And as you can see, if we look at anything to do with technology, whether it's digital teaching and learning, IT infrastructure and support tools, uh, these solutions are expected to have an accelerated growth over the next period. So whether we're talking about productivity applications, learning management systems, ebooks and e-learning applications, online institutions in general, or massive online courses that are delivered, and especially for higher education and for more specialized education. All of these technologies are going to see a accelerated growth over the next period. And in terms of their maturity, a lot of them were basically at a very early stage or an early growth stage when the pandemic hit. A lot of them, as we have seen as well with Springring, is that we got in the middle of a massive growth in demand, and we basically moved from a push situation where we would have to go and convince our clients, being schools, of the necessity of these tools, to them approaching us and telling us that they actually now have moved from a kind of a luxury, nice to have situation as in regards to our tools, to a must have and a need. And this is basically the trend that we're seeing this going towards. Now, of course, you have a lot of implementation of either robotics, artificial intelligence, and a lot of data analytics, especially when it comes to assessments and individualized learning for students in general. So we don't see a huge effect on the brick and mortar operations of schools, especially that now with uh, kind of both parents, teachers, and the wider community in general just now convinced of the importance of schools and on-premise attendance of schools, and that won't go away. But one thing that will change is that even those schools, even though the kids are hopefully going back to school in person very soon, the need for the introduction of technology, the need for a more collaborative relationship between the home and the school will gain a lot more prominence going forward. So these are the things that are kind of seen as trends in the near future. Now, one of these, just to kind of wrap up, and this is something that not only we've seen it through our talks with schools, but has also been built on a lot of feedback received from both educators, school administrators, and parents, even globally, is that online education is here pretty much to stay. It's has gone through a very accelerated implementation. It's an experiment that was pretty much forced on everyone. Uh, and I'm pretty sure a lot of outtakes will be taken from this, whether negative or positive. But one thing that's for sure is that education in sorry, technology in education is here to stay. Um, but the upcoming online transformation in education will be embraced pretty much to drive teacher productivity. One thing that we've seen during the pandemic is that teachers were working far more than they were prior to it. So the introduction of technology actually increased their workload in a lot of instances. The ongoing trend would be how to implement these technologies in a way that allows for an increase in teacher productivity on a more focused approach to education rather than on administrative or communicative tools that are basically increasing the workload of teachers. But finally, as well, we've heard a lot of terms in education over the past period, whether it's hybrid education, online education. But one thing and a term that we see education mainly leaning towards is a blended learning approach. So in-person teaching pretty much is here to stay. Students will go back to school, but will have a lot more exposure to online learning rather than only in the traditional way where they only learn in school and do things in school only. And this is pretty much a focus on K-12 education. Finally, and this is basically a larger outtake that affects the whole, not only the educational industry, but also the wider economy, is that the acceleration of technology adoption in the educational system will also accelerate the need for the reskilling of teachers and also workers in the broader economy. And this has pretty much been kind of laid bare during this pandemic, where they were not prepared for it, and in a sense caused a lot of the problems that could have been avoided had the teachers and also the other workers been more prepared for it from a skill set point of view. So that's basically it. Hopefully, just keeping it a bit short. But this is just a quick journey through the educational system over the past period.
Mohammed, incredible work, and thank you very much for the very comprehensive and insightful presentation. You took us through a very interesting historical overview of the evolution of technology within the broader field of education. And also, you spoke about the various advantages and challenges of introducing and using technology in the classroom, making the point that digitization of the classroom is a good thing that needs to understandably be done with caution. And of course, you spoke about the impact of COVID, which has been enormous, and to a significant extent has been forced upon us and has led to the rapid digitization of things, right? Including the traditional way through which kids get educated, as well as the whole experience of being in a school in general, and the way through which members of the educational and school ecosystems do their work and interact with one another. Innovators like yourself have saved the day and made this rapidly transformational process, which has been very, very challenging, an experience that's smoother and easier. Mohammed, you did touch upon in general, and to some extent, about what we expected to be seeing in the future. But given again the rapid way through which disruptive technology is introduced, would you be able to point out some specific areas within education that are expected to see innovation in the immediate future?
Well, in the immediate future, I think the focus will be on the proper introduction of technologies that help teachers better deliver whether it's lesson or educational materials and so on. Let's not forget, education has been lagging behind all the other industries. A disruption, so to speak, in the immediate future is not expected. It's pretty much, it's in its infancy, let's say. Um, the introduction of the proper tools, and we consider ourselves one of those tools that basically helps bring together everyone on to a technological platform that hope increases efficiency, productivity, and so on. And you have many tools that provide the same. One of the major challenges to schools is the fragmentation and disconnected way that educational technology tools have been introduced. So a consolidation is expected. A lot of learning is expected in the near future. But if we talk more long term, I think individualized learning, democratized learning, things that will be more focused on the individual will gain a lot more traction, whether it's artificial intelligence, VR, in classrooms, and so on and so forth. But it all depends on the willingness of both the governments and schools to keep on investing in these technology going forward.
Absolutely. And taking into consideration everything that's expected to be seen, what is next for Springring? You guys are doing a magnificent job developing the platform and expanding it. So what is your plan with regards to further enhancing the Springring offerings? And also, are you contemplating an international expansion?
Well, if you look back at our own, history, we only opened up our beta platform in the beginning of 2020. So what happened is we saw a huge growth that we were pretty much, in some instances, were not even prepared for. But we saw a huge growth that presented its own challenges. I always say we had actually a good problem at the time. And we expanded a lot, and we gained a lot of feedback that would have taken us a lot more time to gain from actual users. Now, the thing is, beginning of 21, we kind of offered our platform on a commercial basis to schools. We are currently only in Bahrain. We're thinking of expanding quite soon into our neighboring countries in the Middle East. But definitely our plan is to go beyond that. And in terms of feature set, our main objective is always to focus on solving the communication problem that we've seen during the pandemic between the home and the school. But hopefully in the future, even expand beyond that, where we can, one of the things basically that I was talking about was the fragmentation of the industry itself, the edtech industry, where most of the tools don't speak to each other. And we want to help in bringing everything together in one place.
Absolutely. And you guys are doing a great job, so I'm sure everything is going to be nice and smooth. Mohammed, thank you again very, very much for the very comprehensive and detailed presentation on how technology and COVID have impacted the broader field of education as part of the Leading Entrepreneurs of the World series. Congratulations on all of your success with everything that you guys have done so far. And we look forward to seeing and admiring your growth and expansion of Springring in the future. Thank you, and talk to you again soon.
Thank you very much, Stelios, for having me, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you, Mohammed. We'll speak again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.